Up until now, if you wanted something done in your program several times in a row, well, then you were stuck with having to code that thing out several times in a row. And so, for whatever reason, say we're feeling very pushy but very friendly at the same time, and we want to say hello to the user 5 times in a row, well, then you have to manually code out hello 5 times. And well, that gets the job done, but that's pretty tedious. What if we wanted to get even pushier and say hello 1,000 times or even 1,000,000 times? What if we didn't even know the number of times we wanted to say hello and it varied every time we ran the program? How would we get that job done? Well, it sounds like magic, but that's where the magic of loops steps in. Now, there are different type of loops, but I'm going to teach you about the while loop first. And so let's jump right on in. Now, how does the while loop work? You type out the keyword while, and then you throw in a set of parentheses, no semicolon at the end of this line. We're going to drop down and put a code block in. Now, if you're thinking to yourself, this looks pretty familiar to say an if statement where we have the keyword if, and then we're going to throw in a set of parentheses, no semicolon at the end of the line, and we're going to drop down and put a code block in, well, then you might be on to something. You know, these two things are pretty similar. And the if statement within these parentheses, we add some sort of test condition, say like x is less than 5. And well, so we can work with this a little bit better. Let's bounce on up top here. I'm just throwing an integer x, and we'll say that x equals 0. Well, in this test condition, x is less than 5, we know that this is a relational operator that basically compares these two operands. And x equals 0 in this particular scenario. 0 is less than 5, so this relational operator returns a truth value of 1. And well, if this is a true statement here, then we execute the lines of code that come within this if statement. And if this is false, like say for instance, if x were to equal 7, 7 is not less than 5. This returns false. This code block here gets skipped. And well, we know how if statements work, and I'm bringing it up though because while loops work exactly the same. As a matter of fact, in these parentheses here, we can put the same test condition if x is less than 5. Now, if this is true, x is 0 now, 0 is less than 5, then we're going to execute the code block here. And if x was to say something else, 8, then this would get skipped. 8 is not less than 5, and so we don't execute this code block, we just move on. That's exactly how the if statement works. Now, the key difference is that if this is true for the if statement, back to x equaling 0, if this was true for the if statement, this code block gets executed, but then we move on with life. We keep on executing code below this if statement. Now, the while loop works a little differently. If x is 0 here and this is true, then we execute this code block. But after we're done executing that code block, instead of moving on, we bounce back up top. We retest this condition. If x is still less than 5, then we execute this code block again. And once we're done, again, we bounce up here and retest this condition. If it's true, then we execute. If it's true, then we execute forever, essentially, until this x is no longer less than 5. This x is sort of our exit strategy to this while loop, right? And so let's start putting some code in this while loop. Let's say that the code in here, we're going to see out hello to the screen a little bit more efficiently than we were before, right? Now let's trace this by hand. So x equals 0. 0 is less than 5, so this is a true statement. So we enter this code block. We print out hello to the screen. That's all the code that's in here. It could be thousands of lines of code. It doesn't have to be. Obviously, we have one line of code in ours. So after we're done executing this one line of code, then we're going to bounce back up top. We're going to retest this statement. 0 still less than 5. We're going to print off hello. Then we're going to bounce up top. 0 still less than 5. We're going to print off hello. 0 still less than 5. Hello. True. Hello. True. Hello. True. Hello. And so you see that we're not really making any progress here. X is always going to equal 0. This is always going to be a true statement. We're always going to print out hello. And well, you can see this in the results. If we were to run this, we're just printing out hello until the universe dies a slow heat death, or until our computer runs out of memory, whichever comes first. And so this will just execute forever, essentially. Now, that's because we're not utilizing our exit strategy of this X variable here. We need to make this be equal to 5. And we need to make this be greater than 5 so that this ends up being false one of these days and we can get out of this loop. And so what we're going to do on the inside of this loop here is we're going to use our freshly learned increment operator. We're going to say x plus plus here. And so now tracing this out, you see that x equals 0. 0 is less than 5, which is true. We print out hello, increment to 1. Now 1 is less than 5, hello, we increment to 2. 2 is less than 5, hello, we get to 3. 3 is less than 5, hello, x equals 4. 4 is less than 5, hello. Now x finally equals 5. 5 is not less than 5. 5 equals 5. So we skip this and continue on with the code. And so now instead of printing off into infinity, we get hello 5 times. Now, interestingly, this doesn't really affect the operation of this in any way, but just realize here that if we were to number these hellos, we would number them from 0 to 4. This would be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 because, well, x equals 0 for the first hello, and 4 is the last valid hello that prints out because once x gets to 5, we exit the loop. Now, you can number these like a normal human being by saying, I don't know, x equals 1 here, and we're going to say x is less than or equal to 5, and this will still print out 5 hellos. Now, these are numbered 1 through 5 like a normal person would number them, but we are not normal people. We deal with computers, and this syntax is way more common. Going from 0 to less than 5 instead of going from 1 to, well, equals 5. This is how stuff is numbered in the computer world. You start counting with 0, as weird as it is, and we'll understand more about that later. But for the time being, just get used to the idea that instead of counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we count 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And it's still 5 things, but we start counting at 0, and you'll see the importance of that later on. But this, nonetheless, is what we call a counter, this x, where we're starting at a particular value, and this while statement is going to run essentially a particular number of times because, well, we're counting the number of times that this while loop runs. Now, what if we don't know the number of times that we want this while loop to run? Say in the case of input validation, this is used all the time. This is another common example of where you would use a while loop. Say that we're going to have this little menu system here, and say we see out to the screen that, I don't know, here is our menu, and for brevity, let's only give the user a couple of options. Let's say that this is option 1, and then we can drop down a line. I'm not even going to explain what option 1 is, and then we can see out to the screen that this is option 2, and well, they can pick one, and so we'll prompt them to say select an option, right? They don't even know what it is. They just know it's option 1 and 2 here, and then we'll see in whatever they select into some integer that we haven't created yet called selection. And so let's bounce up top here, and let's actually create that selection integer. And so there you go. It's just the same menu that we've worked with before, only now it's just got 2 options to it. And so now we have their selection stored within this selection variable, and we can throw in a while loop here. And this while loop, basically what it's going to do is going to make sure that the user has selected option 1 or option 2, but no other options. And it's going to give them a chance to reselect an option if they've selected a wrong option, essentially. And so we can say while, and then we have to put in some sort of test condition here. And so we'll say while selection does not equal 1 and selection does not equal 2. Essentially, if they've picked anything else other than 1 and 2 here, then we're going to go into the code block of the while statement, and then we'll see out to the screen something like invalid selection or something like that, right? Give them a little error message, and then maybe we drop down a couple of lines here. And then all I'm going to do is I'm going to recopy and repaste this menu in there. I'm not going to change anything about how this works. It's the same old menu. Basically, what it's going to do is it's going to tell them that they've selected something that was invalid. It's going to drop down a couple of lines. Then it's going to reprint the same menu and then tell them to select an option. And then after they've selected the option, well, it's going to get stored into that selection variable again. And then we're going to bounce back up to the top of our while loop, and it's going to check in this test condition section, does the selection equal 1 or does the selection equal 2? Well, if not, then it's going to reprint the menu again and tell them to select an option, store that selection, and let's say that they do actually pick a valid selection this time. Say that they do pick 1 or they do pick 2. So for this example, let's say they pick 1. So selection, this variable here holds the value 1. We go back up to here, and one of the conditions here is that selection does not equal 1. Well, this is false. And well, selection we know doesn't equal, we know that it doesn't equal 2, so this is true over here, but we know with ands that both things have to be true for this to turn up with a true value. And so, well, because this is false, selection does equal 1 this time. This is the assertion that selection does not equal 1. Well, the user just entered in selection as 1. Selection does equal 1 here. And so now we're going to exit this while loop. They've picked something valid, and we can stop reprinting the menu to them. And so, well, we can run this to see this in action. And so select an option. Well, we'll pick 1 this time, and it worked, okay? It didn't send us through any loops. Someone picked 2 this time, and it worked. It didn't send us through any loops. Now, let's see if we put in something invalid. So let's pick 3 this time. It tells us invalid selection. It reprints the menu, tells us to select another option. Say we do it again, 4, 5, 6. So as many times as we enter in a bad option here, it's just going to keep on running that loop. And that's sort of why I was talking about in the intro to this topic, you know, what if you don't know how many times you need to run this? Because I don't know how many times the user is going to enter in some nonsense until they finally enter in a 2 that's part of the menu, and then we can stop. Well, it depends on the situation. And so with a while loop, we can run this however many times we need to get the job done. Not one more time, not one less time. And so here is a quick intro to while loops, both used with counters and with input validation, which is very common in your professional endeavors. All right, see you in the next one.